Have you ever stumbled upon something that seemed too strange to ignore? Something that whispered to you in the dead of night? Tonight, I'll share a story about a book that shouldn't have been opened, but was. And once it was, it never let go. The discovery. It all started in a forgotten corner of a second-hand bookstore where the smell of old paper and dust filled the air. Amidst the usual assortment of novels and old paperbacks, one book stood out. Its leather cover, cracked with age, seemed to draw attention, almost as if it were calling out. The title was obscured, unreadable, but the book exuded an air of mystery that no one could ignore. It was placed carelessly on a shelf, surrounded by other, more common-looking books. Yet it seemed out of place, too special to be among them. The spine was worn, and the edges of the pages were yellowed, but it looked oddly inviting. The moment it was touched, the person could feel something strange in the air, a slight chill, an unnerving sensation, as though the book had been waiting for them. It wasn't just a book, it was an invitation. The eerie symbol. When the book was first opened, the pages revealed an eerie symbol intricately drawn in a flowing script that was unlike anything the reader had seen before. The symbol, a spiraling design with sharp edges and geometric precision, seemed to shimmer under the dim light. It wasn't just ink on paper. It felt like the symbol was alive, moving slightly as if reacting to the presence of its observer. The hairs on the back of the reader's neck stood up, a sudden coldness filling the air. It wasn't just the design, it was the feeling it evoked, a deep sense of unease, as if the symbol was more than just decoration. Something ancient, something forgotten, stirred in the corners of the mind. The reader couldn't resist running their fingers over the design, but as soon as they did, a sharp chill surged through their hand, a warning that something had awakened. The symbol was a key, an invitation to something far darker. The first word. As the reader continued flipping through the pages, the ink on the very first page caught their eye. It was a single word, Awaken. The letters were bold, the type unfamiliar, written in a flowing script that seemed to pulse as if alive. Hesitant at first, the reader finally whispered the word aloud. The moment the syllables escaped their lips, the air around them thickened, and the room seemed to shift. A deep, unsettling hum filled the space, reverberating off the walls. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to move, stretching unnaturally as if something was stirring just out of sight. The room became colder, and the soft creak of old wood echoed in the stillness. The word awaken wasn't just an inscription, it was a command, and now that it had been spoken, the reader couldn't help but feel they had crossed a threshold. They were no longer alone in the room. The mysterious pages. The deeper the reader delved into the pages of the mysterious book, the stranger the text became. What began as cryptic but legible writing soon transformed into a tangled mess of symbols and words that made no sense. Each page seemed to pull the reader deeper into its web, as if the book itself was alive, guiding them toward something hidden within its pages. Strange sketches filled the gaps between the text, distorted faces, figures cloaked in shadow, and twisted shapes that appeared to shift as the reader looked away. The drawings were disturbingly detailed, as though someone had seen these figures firsthand. The symbols weren't just foreign, they were powerful, charged with an energy the reader couldn't understand, yet somehow felt. Every turn of the page seemed to disturb the stillness of the room further. The deeper the book was explored, the more tangible the growing sense of dread became. The book was not just a story. It was a conduit to something else. The first sign. At first, the changes were subtle, nothing overt, nothing that could be easily explained. But as the reader continued exploring the book, the first true sign of its influence became apparent. It began with the small things. A door that slammed shut on its own, a sudden gust of wind when all the windows were closed, and faint whispers that seemed to come from the very walls. The room, once quiet and still, now felt alive with movement. Objects began to shift. An old chair that creaked under its own weight. A book that would fall off the shelf without any apparent cause. The shadows in the corners seemed to grow longer, stretching toward the reader as if they were aware of their presence. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with every page turned. The book wasn't just a silent observer, it was active, and its presence was becoming more and more oppressive. The first sign was just the beginning. The haunting begins. It didn't take long for the true haunting to begin. At first, it was easy to dismiss. An object moved out of place, a faint whisper in the dark. But soon, the strange occurrences escalated. It started with the temperature dropping suddenly, an unexplainable chill creeping over the room as the reader turned each page. The once comforting sounds of the house, the creaking of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, began to twist, morphing into eerie, unsettling noises. The whispers grew louder, no longer just murmurs, but distinct voices calling the reader's name. They spoke in an ancient tongue, unintelligible and incomprehensible. The shadows no longer simply stretched. They moved, slithering across the room, reaching towards the reader as if trying to pull them into the dark. And then, the figures from the book, the ones that had once only been sketches, appeared, not on the pages, but in the room. They were no longer confined to the paper. The haunting had truly begun. The ultimate choice. By the time the reader reached the final pages of the book, the atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. The air felt thick, oppressive, and charged with a sense of dread. The pages before them were no longer filled with cryptic symbols and sketches. Instead, the text was clear. It was a message, a choice. The book had always been leading to this moment. The words read, "Close the book and never look back, or continue knowing the cost." The decision seemed simple, but the air grew heavy as the reader lingered on the words. There was no telling what would happen if they continued, but something deep within, the unseen consequences. The decision was made, the book was closed, and the room, though quiet once more, held a strange, unsettling silence. It was over, the reader thought, but they were wrong. The book's power didn't end with the turning of a page or the closing of its cover. No, the curse had already been set in motion. The once harmless whispering voices now followed the reader everywhere, just out of earshot, but always present. The shadows that once seemed to lurk in corners had begun to appear in daylight, flickering in the corner of the eye. The mysterious figures, though never fully visible, seemed to be just within reach, as if waiting. And most unsettling of all, the book was never truly gone. It had returned to its place on the shelf, just waiting for someone else to open it. The consequences were not just in the present. They were waiting for the next curious soul to unlock the mystery once again. The cycle would continue, and no one would be safe. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And if you dare, leave a comment with your thoughts on the book, or perhaps a story of your own. Until next time, stay curious, but be careful what you find.